So we are now behind the wheel of the Aston Martin DB11, and this is a perfect comparison to the Ferrari Roma that I featured late last year. I love that car. It was a Grand Tour, and this is a Grand Tour. We look at the Aston Martin Vantage as being the Grand Tour in the lineup, but when you start looking at its tendencies, how it drives, how it handles, how it feels on the interior, it's more like a sports car. Whereas a DB11 is a true gentleman's vehicle for sure. And you can tell by the interior comfort as well. When you look at the Vantage, it's a bit more sports car oriented, where this is nice leather materials, nice and soft, but also even the way it just drives and handles, it's a lot more comfortable to drive. The sound of that V8 is incredible. It resonates so well into the interior. Now let's first start off with the vision of the DB11. There's really not a whole lot of it, especially for the rear. You have a very small window to see what's behind you. The mirrors are placed really well. And then of course we have that lower roof line, so I have a very small window in front of me, but this, I feel like I'm in a cocoon. I feel like I have the entire interior wrapped around me. Now when you look at where Aston Martin is today with the designs, they're not like other brands that they compete against. So when you look at Porsche, you look at Bentley, you look at Ferrari, there's a lineage there, and you can actually trace the history of the car that's currently on the market. Whereas Aston Martin has switched so many different ownership groups throughout the years that each generation, each decade is completely different. I would argue though that the DB11 is really the only car in the Aston Martin lineup right now where traditional buyers are going to recognize it. Because you look at the Vantage, it's completely different than the Vantage that came before it. And then when you look at the Aston Martin DBX, I mean, can you believe that we actually have a crossover in the lineup? But then also you have the DBS Superleggera, and these cars have come a long way. But also when you look at the fact that you have Mercedes Benz technology for the interior, which you can actually turn off this infotainment system, which I love because I'm really focused on the driving aspect more than the technology. But also you have the V8 under the hood from Mercedes Benz as well, and it really makes these cars come to life. They're no longer just the Grand Tour anymore. They're a car that's going to have a lot of fun and excitement to them, a car that you're going to want to drive on a daily basis. That's exactly what the DB11 is. What I really like too about the Aston Martin DB11 is that it doesn't want to kill you when you want to accelerate in the corners. Whereas the Ferrari Roma just wanted to track to the closest tree line, and that was a bit stressful. Now, of course, it was like 30 degrees out when I drove that car, but the DB11 feels planted, it feels smooth. And this is just what a driver's car is all about. That's what I feel with Aston Martin right now. They're one of the last brands that's all about the driver, being driver focused. Even Porsche today has all this technology now, drawing you in with some of those nice infotainment systems, even the full digital gauge cluster. It's not what Porsche used to be. Whereas right now with the Aston Martin lineup, it's all about the driver, and I can truly appreciate that. Oh my gosh. You get that kickback. It's just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So since we are on an empty road here, there's no one around, there's no houses. It's pretty much a deserted road. Gonna do a quick acceleration here and get a good feel of what this car is capable of. The thing I like about the DB11 is that it's linear. The power is linear. Sure, you have the V8, you have this tremendous amount of torque, but you're not going to worry about having the rear end kick out on you. It's a true Grand Tour is what it is. A lot of drivers who have the money to buy an Aston Martin DB11 who might be a bit concerned, like, oh, is it too much power? Is it going to be too much for me? Not at all. In fact, I would argue that this is the anti-Ferrari Roma. Because the Ferrari Roma, to me, wanted to actually kill me in the corners. Even in a straight line, the car just wanted to go to the nearest tree line. Whereas this feels planted. The steering feels really nice as well, and I'm in Sport Plus mode. So the fact that I have the car in Sport Plus mode and I don't feel like the car's getting away from me is really important. Gosh. And this right here is why a lot of Aston Martin loyalists may not be turned on by what Aston Martin has done over the last 5 years. The V8 might be a bit too growly. It sounds like a hippo or a warthog snorting. That's how loud this car really is. And for some buyers, they might not like that, especially where Aston Martin was always this gentleman's car, more of the laid-back Grand Tourer that you're not necessarily going to draw in a lot of attention. But today, not so much. The DB11 is certainly going to draw attention. Now, since I am not out in the canyon roads here, we're going to have to deal with some of these smaller roads, but I want to get a good feel of the corners. It just hugs the road. Incredible. It just feels so planted. This is what driving is all about right here. Those downshifts, they're addicting. Now, I don't know what the thought process is for most Aston Martin loyalists and traditionalists when it comes to the V8 under the hood for these cars. Now, when it comes to the interior layout, when it comes to the technology, I think you can overlook that. But when it comes to the exhaust note, when it comes to the V8, these cars are a lot more muscly. They're louder. They draw in attention. And before, Aston Martins would always be a car that would fly below the radar but fit the personalities of the driver. People who are more conservative, more laid back, more reserved. Guys who would show up to a 5-star restaurant in Monaco in a tuxedo to meet up and rendezvous with another agent. Aston Martin fit the personality of James Bond. Today, I don't necessarily think so, especially when you look at where the lineup is with the DBX, the Vantage, and even the DB11. I think the DB11 to me is really the last traditional Bond car, if you want to go in that direction and say that. But I think Aston Martin is trying to make a name for themselves without pop culture, without Hollywood pumping this brand up. And I think it's going to help this manufacturer moving forward. When you look at the cars they're making, the DB11, the Vantage, the Superleggera, these are special cars, especially in a time when you have technology, you have computerized feels. This doesn't feel like that. This is one of the last remaining Grand Tours that is truly phenomenal and enjoyable to drive. When it comes to the steering feel, you can throw it into the corners, you can accelerate, and not worry about the car kicking out on you, although I can feel it in the back when you are cornering a bit. But it's enjoyable, it's relaxing, and I think that's really where Aston Martin is always going to draw in a certain type of consumer, whether they like technology or not, whether they're 60-year-olds or 30-year-olds. There's a car for everybody in the lineup, and that's why even today in 2021, Aston Martin still does well when it comes to their Grand Tours. It's certainly softer over the bumps and hobble roads in New England. I can definitely take them and not cringe and not feel like I'm getting thrown around. It's just really a car that you want to drive at all times. I think you could daily drive this for sure, without question, just because of how soft it is, the leather seats, even just the way the interior layout is. It's a car that's not meant to be on a track. It's not a car that's meant to be being pushed to its limits 100% of the time. This is a car you can drive up to New Hampshire or Maine or wherever you're going, maybe down to Florida, and you can just really enjoy the drive. It's really hurting me that I have to give the keys back in about 5 minutes because this is truly fantastic. This is what driving is all about, and it's so sad to see that a lot of brands don't have this anymore. But what I like too is that when it comes to the steering input, it's not super light like the Roma. The Roma is very darty, very responsive, but in a way, it does take away from the driving experience because you're not wrestling the steering wheel. Now, even though the steering wheel isn't very tight, it's not very weighted, you still have some feedback, and I like that. But you can have some fun. You can have some fun and look professional doing it. And that's why the DB11 to me is still a very special car. But more importantly though, and this is what really stands out to me, what I can appreciate near the end of this test drive, is that the technology isn't thrown in my face. It's all about the driving dynamics. It's all about being zoned in. And there's not a lot of cars like that anymore on the road. Even the Roma today has a big infotainment system, has a very in-depth digital gauge cluster. It's not the same. We're losing that feel. We're losing what these cars were all about. And now we have a car, or we still have a car, that still gives you that technology feel, but at the same time, it's a grand tour. It's what driving is so much about. And that's why, as an enthusiast, this is a very special day for me. One more time in manual mode before I give the keys back. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. The ZF 8-speed pairs so well with this turbocharged V8 from Mercedes Benz. It's intoxicating. It is totally intoxicating.